Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 22.
I am more partial to episodes that end in 2, just because of powers of 2, which this is not, and then multiples of 11 and 2. I don't have anything to say about 22, but I like 22 better than 21.
And today we're going to talk about games and life, I think. Let's start with some business, though. Last time I offered our audience an opportunity to join in, participate in the show by voting on what our next book discussion would be. I have to say with a bit of chagrin that I potentially am suffering from hubris here and forcing our audience to listen to another nonfiction title. Maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment or a tyrant, since this is my podcast. But if the number of people that voted in the poll is any sign of how much interest there is, we came in at less than 10% of our listeners to episode 21 that actually voted in the poll.
Wow, 10% of 400 million people, though, Ben. That's a lot.
So I'm going to go through with it. I'll formally seek some feedback after we're done, but I promise it won't be dull. Folks, if you've listened to the podcast for any amount of time, you know that when Josh and I get together and we talk about things like human psychology, it's going to be an interesting discussion. So the winner was Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. The book is by Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck. She wrote a book about an idea she calls the power of mindset. In the book, she shows, I'm reading from the jacket here, she shows how success in school, work, sports, the arts, and almost every area of human endeavor can be dramatically influenced by how we think about our talents and abilities. So
you know that whenever we talk about psychology, you and I are going to conflict because I am very, very skeptical of a lot of ideas that psychologists come up with. And this, honestly, that jacket cover description just sounds like, yeah, if you're dedicated and focused, you're probably going to have more success.
All right. Well, it's a bit deeper of a topic than that, and I think you'll enjoy it. So we'll read this and have a discussion on it next time. I'll put a link to the book if you want to burn your Audible credit on it this month. Great. If you just want, she's a very well-spoken author, and she's done TED Talks and videos, and I'll put a couple of links in the show notes for this episode.
Cough, Audible, sponsor us. Cough, cough. Oh, excuse me.
Let's do some bad at parenting.
So I have the bad at parenting story this week. And so with all the COVID-19 stuff, I'm still working at home most of the time. My boss has come up with a plan where we're rotating in the office one day a week. And that's just to keep things moving. Like there's some things that you can only do if you're physically there. And so we're all taking one day a week to go into the office and do these physical processes. My day is Thursday. So I went into the office and I was there all day Thursday, and I came home, and just like any normal day of work, you just toast, right? Just done. Like I've been thinking and working all day, and I just want to sit down and relax.
Yeah.
And I came home, and my family was in the middle of having an impromptu game afternoon. And they've been playing cards and Jenga and like some of the little games.
Your family, like Nicole and Carter and...
Yes, Nicole and the
Jane.
kids, Carter and Jane, yes. So they go, my wife's like, oh, come here and play this game with us. And I sat down on the living room floor. I was like, okay, how do you play? And then my son goes, well, you do. And then my wife stopped him. No, don't tell him. He'll figure it out. And the game was called Spot It Junior. And it's a game for little kids. And it's actually really cute. It's these circular cards. And each card has got like 6 little animals, like cartoon animals on it, right? And they're all different. And I had to pick it up based on the gameplay, what was happening.
Okay, we have this game. I played it.
Oh, okay.
We have the non-junior version of it.
Okay. Well, the junior version is like you have one card, and then the deck is face up, and you put it down, and then you go. And the first person to spot something on the card that's face up in the deck that matches one of the cartoon animals on their card, they call out what the animal is, and they get to pick it up. And now they have a new card to look at, and so does everybody else.
And whoever gets the most cards wins.
Yes, whoever gets the most cards wins. Well,
yeah, you didn't need anyone to explain the rules to you to this.
No, after like 2 or 3 people picked up cards, like I got it, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And then I go, oh, squirrel, shark, octopus, seal, elephant, flamingo. And then like
You went wire to wire, didn't you? You picked up the whole stack, and they're all sitting there watching you.
No, and then my wife goes, "Daddy," and I was like, and I look up and I met her eyes, and she's like, she gave me the look. All right, so kudos to our spouses.
You're playing to win against little kids, Josh.
They can convey such information in glances, and I got the glance that just the look on her face, I knew the whole conversation was, "What are you doing, you a-hole? You're playing with two little kids. It's a little kid's game. Throttle back." And I was like, oh. And then I didn't pick up any more cards, and I think I still won that round on accident.
Oh, no. Okay, so you're going to have this moment. It's coming. I've had this moment now where, like, you stop going from let the kids win, which I know I've established in this podcast that I don't let my kids win. But you go from letting the kids win to trying to play competitive to see if you can push them a little bit to... Okay, so you know the game Memory, right? Where you lay out 40 cards face down, and you randomly turn over two, and then do it until you figure out where the matches are and turn them over, and whoever collects the most matches wins.
Yes.
So my daughter is so good at this game, I cannot beat her if I'm like absolutely trying my hardest. And she's 10 years old. She just schools me every time we play it, like badly. I guess my memory's going, but the time is coming when you won't have to hold back, and your kids will give you a run for your money.
Okay, so that happened too this past week. There's a game called KeyForge that my wife bought me a couple of decks for, and this game is cool. It's a card game similar to Magic, where it's a collectible card game. But the idea is that all of the decks are procedurally generated, and they're all unique. Like, you can't mix and match the cards. You go buy a whole deck, and you have to play with that deck, and it has the name of the deck printed on the back of every card. And so my son and I sat down, because we had never played it, and we both read the rules together, and we kind of figured it out. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And we sat down to play, and like halfway through the game, like I'm building up this board state where I'm just going to start just crushing him, right? And then he goes, well, I'm going to do this, and that does this and this. And I was like, oh, but that doesn't kill any of my creatures. Like, you want to do it this way. And he goes, no, I want to do it this way. I'm like, but that's not going to do anything. Are you sure? And I'm trying to talk him out of it. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it this way. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then the next card he plays, because he had set it up the way that he had set it up with the previous move, destroyed everything that I had and set me back to square one. And he ended up winning by light years. Like, he just completely decimated me after that.
Sheer dumb luck?
No, he had the plan the whole time. That's why I was trying to talk him out of doing what I thought was a stupid move, but I didn't realize he was setting me up for an epic fall.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
Those
really...
are good moments.
Yeah. And I was torn because on my one side, I'm like, dude, that was awesome. High five, buddy. And then he walked out of the room, and I'm like, I'm going to kill that little bastard.
Well, that moment you described where you came in the room and you're is he 8 now? 7?
7, going to be 8.
Your 7-year-old son was about to try to explain this game to you that doesn't need any explanation whatsoever. So that brings us to Bad at English. So the bad English phrase today is a British idiom that I heard frequently used, and the phrase is, you don't teach grandma how to suck eggs. And the meaning of the phrase is, you don't teach someone that knows more than you about how to do something. The British typically used it when they were talking to someone that they recognized as a potential expert, as in, you might know more about this than me, and to protect myself from the embarrassment of telling you something you already know, I'm going to say, you don't teach grandma how to suck eggs, and then say it anyway. And the British were great at always saying something that they probably shouldn't say, but giving themselves a little bit of top cover so they could say it anyway. But anyway, the underlying idea is just what Nicole told Carter when you came in the room. You don't teach Josh how to play games.
It's a bit little, yeah. It's got cards. It's a game. There's a win state. I'll be fine. I'll pick it up.
I think the meaning of the phrase, it dates back, the earliest usage I could find of it was from a text from the 1701. It's really old. And I think the meaning of suck eggs is just about getting the yolk and white out of an egg without breaking the shell. But it's the kind of thing that, if you think you're going to teach your grandma about it, you got another thing coming because she already knows.
So wait, last time on the show, we established that the primary source for most of your English idioms was some friend of yours that you would harass into telling you the explanation of.
Uh-huh.
But this sounds like like he didn't know, like, oh, well, this actually dates back
they
to
don't know.
1701.
They don't know where this one came from.
That's what I'm saying. So you, sir, did some etymology. You went to a library and like had to look crap up to get this explanation.
No, there's a few real good etymology websites and some blogs and stuff. I just read some stuff on the internet. Anyway,
you put way more effort into this than I would put into anything.
Well, the thing that fascinates me about this one, like you pointed out, is that they use it, but they don't know why. Like, they understand the meaning of it. Everybody knows when you say you don't teach grammar to suck eggs, it means you're trying to tell somebody something that they probably already know about, or maybe know more than you about. So I started looking, and I found other languages all have a version of this, and they're all different. It's really cool. So in French, they might say les oisons veulent mener les au paître. And I'm sure I said that way wrong, and my sister who listens to this podcast speaks French, so she can say it and correct me. But it means the goslings want to drive the geese to the pasture, as in the kids trying to tell the grown-ups where to go. In Italian, Insegnar nuotare out pesci, to teach fish to swim. You don't teach fish to swim. They know how. In German, will seinen Vater lernen Kinder erziehen. He would teach his father to raise children.
Okay, it's the same idiom, just in a different language in a different way. But if you're saying it in German, you've got to be way angrier when you say it.
Will seinen Vater lernen Kinder erziehen.
That is exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
So I have a favorite version of this that I'd heard a few years ago, and it comes to my mind constantly just because it's such a beautiful short phrase, and yet it has so much meaning in it. And it's, every generation likes to think that they invented sex.
And, you said this on the podcast before, and I'm going to stand my ground on this. No, I don't think that we invented sex, but I sure as hell think that we, refined it quite a bit.
You wouldn't be here if someone else hadn't figured it out. So go ahead and think that you figured it out for the first time.
Fair
but you
enough.
Can't teach grandma to suck eggs.
Which is so weird. I don't want to teach grandma to suck eggs. Who would want to try to teach their grandma to do that?
Like we pointed out in the past, we're probably talking to people in the future, and the COVID-19 pandemic will have passed and run its course, and the quarantine will be over. But right now, we're still living in the reality of this. However, since the last time you and I talked, something big happened in the United States.
Yeah, not only that, but there's so many things that happened in the last 2 weeks that I feel like we should revisit this topic, if just for very briefly. And so, the first one, for the very brief explanation, there was a global pandemic. It's called COVID-19. Google it. You can find all the great details. We've been shut down here in Arizona since the late May. I want to say May. Yeah, since late May, we've been shut down at home. Then the governor tried to open things.
That was early.
Oh no,
April.
That's not May. You're right. I'm thinking March.
March.
I'm getting my months mixed up. You're right. So we've been in lockdown for several months now. But our governor decided to start opening things back up in May. There was a huge push, if you remember, across the nation.
It was way stronger in Arizona. You're in a red state. I'm in a blue state.
Fair enough. It was very strong in Arizona to reopen. There was a lot of people that were flauntingly non-compliant. There was restaurants that were opening saying oh, we don't believe this is a real thing, and the governor can come down here and shut us down himself if he thinks he can.
Wow, is not happening in Illinois.
It happened, and then the governor reopened everything because of, I guess, tremendous political pressure. And now Arizona is famous in the news this past week for the tremendous amount of COVID-19 cases that are ramping up. We are pushing tens of thousands of people that are infected. We're getting close to 2,000 new infections a day. People are still dying from this. We are rapidly approaching our capacity for hospital beds. They're talking about shutting down elective surgeries. The Department of Health Services encouraged all the hospitals to revamp their emergency plans and put them into action.
Wow.
And this is a serious thing.
They started to loosen up, and it got way worse.
Yes, but it's starting to get way worse. And the problem is there's no pressure to push it back down. There's nobody talking about shutting the state back down. There's nobody talking about going back to stay-at-home orders. It's just everybody's kind of shrugging well, we tried and nobody really liked it, so we're just going to let them, I don't know, I guess die. But
wow.
All of that
That's
aside,
a completely different experience than we're having here.
It's bananas, Ben. It's just bananas. And again, my kid has asthma. I'm taking zero chances with this whole thing.
Okay, let me pull you for a few things just to take your temperature, because I'm experiencing this here in the state of Illinois, where Governor Pritzker was one of the first to lock down the whole state, cancel school, close restaurants and bars, all those kinds of things. It has never let up. His initial stay-at-home order expired on the 31st of May, and we've tentatively gone to a phase 3 where you're allowed to have social gatherings of 10 or less. Some things are starting to reopen. A couple of restaurants in my town have set up outdoor plazas kind of thing. But here's the temperature question. When you go to the grocery store, are there still like the paths on the floor and the 6 feet separation things near the checkout?
So we never had the paths on the floor, but there are still the 6 foot separation marks on the floor. There are still the plexiglass shields between us.
Did they make the aisles one way?
No, they did not do that. It's still free reign. And I would say probably about a third of the people in the store still don't wear masks.
That was the next question I was going to ask. A third. Holy cow. So we have people at the entrance of the store checking for masks, which is interesting with the business, because they want you to come and they don't want to tick you off, but they also want everyone to feel safe there. And so the way they do it is they put their friendly associate in front of the store, and they gently offer you a mask if you didn't bring one.
Which is a good way to socially pressure people into doing it. Because if you tell somebody not wearing a mask, hey, put on a mask, you jerk, then that's immediately going to put them on the defensive.
You're inviting a confrontation.
Yes. But if you have some super friendly person, oh, sir, I see that you forgot your mask. Here, you want to be like everybody else, right? Here's your mask.
Yeah. And some of those people, they walk through the door and they throw it in the nearest garbage or just drop it on the floor. I've seen the ones that, like you've seen, that don't wear it over their nose, or they just let it hang around their neck or whatever.
I saw a guy at the grocery store take his, he had made a face and he took his mask off and then sneezed into his arm and then put the mask back on. And I'm
sneezed on the nearest freezer door handle and then put his mask back on.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm down the aisle well, I guess I don't need anything in that aisle today.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway.
So I would say the adherence in general is somewhere in the 80 to 90% range here. And you're saying there it's about 60?
Yeah, if that. It was a super hard push. And all right, so at work, we are open by appointment only, and only if we have physical documents that you own and you need to pick them up. You need to schedule an appointment. We have the door locked all day. You have to call when you get there. We unlock the door for you, and then we back off. I would be wearing a mask. All of your papers would be on a table. I was like, your papers are over there.
So you started going back into the office?
Yeah, the 1 day a week.
Oh, okay, sorry. You said that already.
Yeah, it's no problem. But I'm 10 feet away from the client with a mask on. I tell them, your document is over there. Sign that piece of paper, put it in the box next to you, and then take your documents and then leave. And then after they leave, I lock the door. I spray everything down with sanitizing agents. I wash my hands 6 times. If they used our pen, we have a cup with 1 pen in it. And if they used that pen to sign the document instead of bringing their own, we tell them to, we throw that pen in the trash and we get a new one.
Wow.
We're not screwing around, right?
Dude, that's like surgery level of infection prevention.
So my son has asthma. He's high risk.
Sure.
Our office manager has asthma. She's high risk. The owner of the store just recovered from cancer, so she has a suppressed immune system. She's at risk. Everybody in the office has some risk factors, so we're not taking any chances. But the point of this is, one of my clients came in who's an elderly gentleman. He comes in, he's no mask, no gloves, whatever. And he comes oh, you guys aren't scared of this whole thing, are you?
Yeah, you got one of those.
Not just one of those, Ben. It's every other person that comes in. They can't believe, how many phone calls have we fielded or how many emails have I had to gently respond to with people why are you closed? This whole thing is being overblown or whatever stupid reason they want to come up with. And they just, I don't know who these people are or where they live, but in the real world, there's numbers that show that it's getting way worse in our state. And we're making national news for how bad it is ramping up.
So yeah, the death rate's still 5 to 10% kind of thing. It's high.
Yes, but the biggest problem is that the entire COVID-19 pandemic scare that shut down the entire country for months is being completely shoved out of the news cycle by other seriously important events that are happening in the country.
So I wouldn't have even thought it were possible. This has been so utterly dominant in all of the news sources and public discourse that I thought, what could possibly happen that would push COVID-19 so far out of people's thoughts that the news wasn't even talking about it anymore? And yet it's happened.
So, and rightfully so, because this is something that should have this level of attention and something we should be paying more attention to. And that is the murder, flat out, of George Floyd.
Yeah.
He was
have
not
you watched the, have you so the only way I think something can capture the public mind this way is if someone captures it on video and we all look at it and have a personal experience with it. So have you watched the video in its totality?
Not in its totality, no. I've seen the clips.
Yeah, I forced myself to do it. I sat down and watched the whole 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It was really unpleasant. It was really, really unpleasant to just watch this man who, was being manhandled by 4 uniformed police officers with guns, and his hands were tied behind his back, and they threw him through the car, forced him down on the ground, and the one police officer stuck his knee right in his neck until he was, calling for his mama, and he died there. And even after he was unconscious, bystanders were saying, "Let him up, let him go," and the police officer held his knee on that guy's neck for another full minute and a half, I think, after he was unconscious. He didn't stand a chance. He died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a brutal thing, and this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time. Now, this is a racially charged issue and a topic, and me being the privileged white guy that I am, I don't have a leg to stand on, Ben. Like I've never taken any kind of academic classes in this topic. I've not spent an extensive amount of time researching it. So I have nothing to say. Like, I have nothing to add to this entire conversation as far as race relations in America go. The only thing that has been driving me absolutely insane about this entire discussion is the way that it's being handled in the media, and watching both sides of it completely. You use tiny, tiny facts to completely dismiss every point that the other side is trying to make. So if you've been living under a rock, there's been just week-longs of every night people going out and protesting and calling for change for the kind of treatment that the minorities in this country suffer at the hands of law enforcement.
Yeah, so this happened in Minneapolis, and there was, within a couple of days, there was riots in Minneapolis and burning and things like that. But then it flared up across the whole country, like all 50 states, cities large and small, everywhere, protests and all kinds of action. This is not something that the people of the United States of America are willing to accept.
Right. But the problem is that because some of these protests turn violent, some of these protests turn to looting, that the people in power, or the people that disagree with their perspective, or the people that run the police stations, they get to point to the minority of the protesters that are calling for change and say, oh, well, this is just a giant gang of dissidents and anarchists and terrorist organizations and looters and rioters. Why should we even have to listen to any of you? You are the kinds of people that are causing these problems. And on the flip side of that, they also get to point, they point to like the George Floyd incident itself. And they're like, oh, well, that is one bad cop. And you can't take one bad cop and say that is the entirety of the police force and you're suffering this systematic thing. That's just one bad guy. It's like, yes, that is one guy. And there's the vast majority of police officers are out there just trying to do their best. But that doesn't mean that you get to completely dismiss the point that all of these people are trying to make, and that there is a systemic problem in the system that needs a complete and utter overhaul. Yeah. And just because you don't want to deal with it, or because taking a stance on either side of this issue is going to kill your political career, this is why I get so worked up.
And I'm worried that it's so deeply embedded in the system that nothing short of like a really radical, breakdown and reinvention of what we do will fix it.
That is the heart of this problem, is because it is so big, because it is so ingrained in our culture in some ways, and in bureaucracies and in the systems that we've built, that it would take such monumental effort to fix these kinds of problems. it is much more to the benefit of the people in charge to stall, delay, and just push this topic to the side until all the protesting stops, until the news cycle moves on to something else, and then they don't have to do anything.
So I found this tweet that I put up on my Facebook feed that was Donald Trump during the run-up to the presidential election, criticizing Barack Obama for letting the chaos reign and there be riots in cities in America. So I looked, and he said that the president should resign because this should never happen under a good leader. And I thought that was deliciously ironic, so I posted it, and I went back and looked what it was. It was in the summer of 2015, and the riots started in Baltimore and flared up all over the country. And it was a young man that was in police custody that died in police custody. And there was no video of this particular one, but it was still egregious enough that it got the same amount of attention and riots all around the country. So, this isn't new, and it isn't isolated. That was Baltimore and Minneapolis, both not top 10 biggest cities in the country. And there's just this disproportionate violence against blacks in law enforcement.
Yeah, not just law enforcement, but there's so many systems built. The finance industry, the education industry, the housing industry, there are just built-in prejudices. And to extents that I don't comprehend because I've never faced it. And this is when I prefaced at the beginning, like I don't have anything to add to that part of the conversations because I don't. I have not experienced any of this. I can disagree with it and I can rail against it as much as I want, but I've never had to suffer it. So I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be in those shoes.
Well, if you're like me, you see this and you see the suffering and you see the chaos and you think, they're right. It shouldn't be like this. What can I do? What can I do to help? How can I help make this better? What personal biases do I need to re-examine? What causes do I need to support? What changes do I need to be willing to make? Should I go and protest? I can't tell you how many times, Josh, I've gone on a discussion about this online and I've written something out and deleted it. I'll see a comment feed flaring up on a friend's Facebook page and I'll type something out and I'll stare at it and I'll delete it and I'll type something else out it and I'll delete it again. I like you said, I don't know what to say.
My problem is with all of these things, I have such an individual taxpayer and a voter in America has such low agency that it is so incredibly difficult to even figure out what you can do. And I'm the kind of person that I want to see results. Like I get frustrated if we sit and plan and talk about things for too long. I'm like, okay, we've been talking about this forever. Let's do something. And so personally, and this is a fault of mine. If I can't see a path where my actions lead to actual change, then I can't motivate myself to do it. Like as one person, like, yes, I could go to the protests, but what am I going to contribute to that is not already there? And that's so bad to say because, yes, we need these kinds of changes and nothing's going to happen with people like me being apathetic. But I just don't know what to do. I just don't know what I can personally, how I can influence any kind of decision in this topic.
Well, the elections are coming up and there's a chance. I know what you said, it's the effect of a single individual. But there's that scene, if you remember, from Disney Pixar Bug's Life, where the grasshopper is giving the other grasshopper a lecture about why you don't let one ant get away with getting out of line.
It's a classic scene where he's at the weird bar where they're serving the beans. Yeah.
Right. And he pulls the lid off the jar and all the little tiny seeds come rolling out and bury the grasshopper. That's what's happening right now in the country, man. There's all the ants are realizing that they can't put up with this. We can't have our a routine traffic stop turn into a fatality just for the sake of peace and law and order.
So yeah, my wife and I have been talking a lot about this topic, and we have strong opinions on it. But we're weird, Ben, because we live in a red state, but we're pretty liberal on this side. Like, I firmly believe that we should have socialized medicine. I firmly believe that we should go the route Australia did and just ban all firearms in America. I think society would be better served without weapons. That is not the popular opinion in my state. However, I am keenly aware that Arizona this year is, they're considering it a battleground state. because the Democrats believe that they can flip it and make it a blue state.
Wow.
So we're...
At least for the presidential election?
Senatorial race. There is a strong suspicion that our deeply ingrained Republican senators might, at least one of them might be replaced by a Democrat this cycle. So that's it. That's my contribution, is I'm voting Democrat in the coming election, because like this, all the answers I hear from the other side don't make any sense.
I've never voted Democrat ever before in my life. But you may know that I have been an ardent Trump hater since he burst onto the scene back when I thought it was still a joke. And I've never changed my stance on that. In the election, when I voted in Nevada, there wasn't even a write-in option. I could vote for Hillary Clinton, which I didn't want to do, and Donald Trump, or none of these candidates. So that's the box I marked on my ballot, none of these candidates. As did a few other people, enough to have made the difference and got us the leader that we currently have. Anyway, we had started off by talking about COVID-19 and how it had been going down because of all the protective measures and the quarantine and that kind of thing, and then this flare-up of strained race relations in the United States because of the video that came out about George Floyd dying in Minneapolis. And then it's like, that didn't happen. I mean, other than if you look at videos of the protests and some of the people seem to be wearing masks, it's like we went from talking about staying indoors, staying at home, to all of a sudden giant crowds in the streets in every city in America.
Yes, and that is causing problems in my state, because we opened way too early, and now we're having large mass gatherings of people, whether they're doing, the right thing in their protesting. We're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about the fact that, hey, can you guys maybe protest 6 feet apart? Or maybe schedule it in different parts of the state or whatever. Like just on Thursday, there was 2 restaurants and a handful of bars that all, like, they say they voluntarily shut down after speaking to the governor's office, but there was a handful of COVID-19 cases that were contact traced back to these handful of restaurants and bars. And they all, I'm doing air quotes, voluntarily shut down temporarily.
You think they got strong-armed?
I mean, I think so. But this is the problem that we're having, is like all this is going on and it's taking all the news media attention, and people are forgetting that, hey, especially in my state, because we're already idiots. Hey, idiots, people are still dying from an airborne illness. Can we please keep doing the things we need to do to get through this without everybody dying?
Yeah, it's like everyone just forgot. And I get it. Some things are more important, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what, a protest looks like when you're also trying to maintain social distancing.
I don't know. Maybe it looks like a. I don't even know. It looks
like Hong Kong.
Maybe. I don't know. But all of this, like the sum of this whole discussion is like, it feels like more than ever before in my whole life that I have to compare this in my mind. This must have been what it was like at the height of the Cold War, living in this country. Just feeling like you're on the brink of disaster. Like, I feel like we watch the news and every day there's one more story that's making us slide closer to this dystopian Armageddon that we've all been watching movies about for years and years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all we need now is like a small nuclear war with North Korea, and that's it. Like, this has every aspect of every like Armageddon movie we've ever seen.
Okay, I get that, but we have this weird way in which we live where you can sit down in front of a little tiny screen and see out into the world in like real time. You're seeing broadcast live feeds of burning buildings in Minnesota and hospital beds filled with people on ventilators and all that kind of stuff, and it feels so close, like it's right in your face. But if you just walk outside your house and go for, I don't know, a 5-mile run around Anthem, what does it look and feel like? It
looks normal. It looks and feels normal. I get what you're saying, but I totally get what you're saying. I get that. We studied that. Like, there was a course that I took in college that talked about how if you have one murder in a population of 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever, then that's the statistic. But if you now have a live feed to every other population of 10,000, there's thousands of people dying a day, and you should be terrified, when really it's not any different than your normal life.
Right.
It's the confirmation bias that you get from the talking heads on the media outlets. And trust me, I am well aware of that. But at the same time, we were just talking about how hundreds of thousands of people have died in just this country from this global pandemic that is only ramping up in my state. And people are deliberately ignorant about it, which drives me nuts. We have protests, mass protests of police brutality, which then created more police brutality in every state. It just feels crazy.
I've done a bit of research on the problem, and I think it's suffering from the same thing a lot of industries do, where there's a union that stood up to protect the workers, and there's this kind of parasitic cycle that happens that has caused it to devolve into the situation where we're at now, where the unions are there to protect the workers, but then what happens is if one police has a history or an incident of brutality or something like that, then the union circles the wagons to stand up for them, and then no definitive action could be taken. That person continues to work in the force, maybe has another incident until something really egregious happens, and there, you can't make any change from inside the organization without angering the whole system.
Well, the bureaucracy is established and it has its own goals and motivations, and it tries to do the best it can, which can screw some people over. And so those people that are getting screwed over, they form their own bureaucracy that has its own motivations that sometimes screw over the other thing, and just everybody messing with everybody else. And yeah, it's just this huge quagmire. You have to have unions because there are big corporations that will take advantage of workers without them. But at the same time, the unions can get screwed up and start detracting from what they're supposed to be doing in the first place.
Yeah, well, and I didn't even think it was possible, but I'm hearing talks of some municipalities or counties or cities completely disbanding their police department. And that would deal with the unions.
I've heard that, and there has been John Oliver, I think, did a report on it. There was 1 or 2 towns on the East Coast somewhere that completely laid off their entire police force, then stood it right back up, but then made every single officer in the chain reapply for whatever job. And so,
now they're no longer in a union.
I don't. Does that dissolve the union? I thought the unions existed outside of the employment.
I don't know.
That's the thing. But the idea there, I can, whether the union is dissolved or not, that's almost kind of irrelevant to the point where it's just the idea that we're going to sit down each and every single person that is in this entire process, and we're going to ask those really hard questions. Can you do the job? Obviously, you can do the job. You've been doing this exact job for 15 years. Let me ask you a bunch of questions about race relations.
So is there any evidence in those towns that John Oliver was talking about that they actually excluded people because of potential problems?
I don't know.
I mean, because if you just lay off the police force and hire everybody back again, really, you just painted the same numbers on the...
Yeah, hopefully they didn't rehire everybody back exactly, or maybe it shook them up enough to make them realize, hey, guys, wake up, you're idiots. I don't know.
So this happened a few years ago, and I've not heard anyone make this connection. This is going to sound completely non sequitur, but there was the Hostess company that makes Twinkies and Ding Dongs had devolved into such a caustic relationship between the management of the company and the union that they couldn't make a profit anymore. The unions were demanding more money, and they were going to come to a work stoppage, and they couldn't reach profitability at those kinds of conditions. So the managers just threw up their hands, declared bankruptcy, and closed the company. I mean, now, as you know, you can still go to a store and buy Twinkies. So what happened basically is someone else bought the name, the brand, and created it again. But that company had just reached a point where it was completely stagnant and could no longer function.
That is mutually assured destruction of the union and the management. And both sides think, well, the other side has to come to terms or else we'll both fall to pieces. And when nobody backs down, then they were both mutually destroyed.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I as a privileged white man, I don't really have anything to add to the race debate, but I definitely don't want to live in a world where our police force, makes people afraid of our law enforcement. It's not a trade-off I'm willing to make. Yeah. And I think there's been I don't know if it's Teutonic or tectonic, a shift in so much that it gives the people in power the impetus they need to make a change and do things like disband the police department. Because 2 weeks ago, if some mayor had said, I'm going to disband the police department, there would have been a different kind of riot, citizens saying, no way, you can't do that. And now people are saying things like that, and citizens going, yeah, maybe that's what we need to do.
And that's not all citizens. There's still going to be the other side of it. They're like, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. These police officers are just doing their jobs to the best of their ability. And most of them are. This is the whole problem, is that maybe it is just a handful of bad eggs, but that doesn't shut down the entire argument that the process and the system itself is flawed in some critical way that I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, if you came to the Bad at Magic podcast looking for answers to the race relations in the United States of America, I'm sorry you're going to go away wanting.
Yeah, we don't have the answers here. Do you know what I have, though, to try to change the subject, like, abruptly and probably in a bad way?
Go.
I have a really bad dad joke that I heard this week that I want to share with you.
Dad jokes.
Yeah.
Bad at dad jokes.
Bad at dad jokes. So, Ben, do you want to hear a joke about pizza?
Yes.
I warn you, it's a little cheesy.
I love a good dad joke. We've talked about life. Let's talk about games for a while.
We've talked about a very depressing life. Let's talk about the thing that lets us escape from that life and go to a happy place. Okay.
So during all this stress of the pandemic and stuff like that, I was under a bit of stress, and I allowed myself to do something I'd previously avoided for having known myself I knew would probably get out of control.
Oh, wow. This is heavy.
It kind of is. So, as you know, this is the Bad at Magic podcast, and anyone that's played Magic or come anywhere near it, it can be a very expensive hobby. The sky's the limit. If you really want to collect and go back to the oldest cards and play the oldest formats, you could spend millions of dollars on it, literally millions.
At my height, I believe I was spending close to $700 or $800 every 3 months on Magic.
Yeah. And the fact that I support not only my own Magic playing, but also frequently maintain playable decks for 2 or 3 other children to go to F&M, that's roughly about my budget for it. But I don't golf. I don't have a car in the garage that I'm working on. This is my hobby. So, that I spend $200 to $400 a month on it is, probably reasonable amount to budget for a hobby for someone like myself.
As long as you, sir, are providing for your family, they have a roof over their heads, air conditioning, and food in the refrigerator, you're doing your job. And you're allowed to take some of that aside for you.
Right. So, but I had never allowed myself to do something like World of Warcraft. Not because I didn't think it was fun or I wasn't attracted to it, but because I knew that if I started playing something like that, it would consume me. It would consume my time and my effort and my energy, and Magic was enough of addiction, and I mostly just stayed away from that just out of kind of a sense of worry and prudence.
Okay. That's good to know yourself that way. I don't know what you got against WoW players, but okay, go ahead.
The internet is rife with stories of people, who don't leave their houses and lose their jobs and those kinds of things.
Ben, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm supposed to stay inside playing WoW.
Okay. So I'd kind of been aware that the landscape of gaming had kind of morphed from the old paradigm of a software publishing giant produces a game and everyone pays $60 each to take the game home and play it. And they get their money by convincing people to play it, and they get their $60, and if they like it, then they tell someone else, and they also pay $60, and so on and so forth. But you get money from somebody one time, and everybody gives the same amount of money, and that's how you make money on your game.
Oh no, Ben, did you just discover microtransactions?
No. So a long time ago, yes, I said no 3 times, but I actually meant yes 3 times. a long time ago, there was people that started to recognize that you could not just get $60 out of people one time, but maybe you could get $2 out of them once a month.
Forever.
For 30 months. Yeah, forever. And then why only get $60 from them? Why not get $100? Why not get $120? As long as you're continuing to provide to them some kind of value and entertainment, then, keep taking their money. And so things, like World of Warcraft came along where you pay a subscription fee. How much was it anyway?
It was and still is $15 a month.
Okay, now since you and your wife and your son all play, do you pay $15 a month each?
My son plays on my account. So if I play with my son, I'm playing on my wife's account. So we only have 2 accounts that we maintain. So
I'm not trying to wow shame you here, Josh.
It feels
just answer the question.
It feels like it. Just answer the question. I currently am paying for 2 accounts, $15 a month. So each $30 a month total.
Trust me, you already know the answer to this. I don't know why you're feeling defensive in the least. You've seen my graph.
So yes, I am actually really not to shame you at all, because we're going to talk about your specific case in a few minutes, I imagine. But this also opens up the discussion of software monetization models and how they have evolved in the last couple of years. And people, I know that sounds boring, but this is a fascinating topic, and this is the way that the industry, that the entertainment industry is going. So
not just fascinating, but if you're a parent and you have children, this might be as important to talk to your kids about as like the birds and the bees. Like, you could be a victim.
Oh, absolutely. There is already nightmare stories, and if you have not heard or understand that there is a way for your son or daughter to go onto their gaming console that you gave them for Christmas and then rack up a $3,000 credit card bill in about 10 minutes, you need to listen to this conversation.
Yeah. So back to what we were saying about how if they could just get you in the door and then have you pay $15 a month for the next 40 months, they're going to make way more on you than if they have you pay $60 once. Well, they found out that they can take it even lower than that. Because unlike an amusement park where you got to worry about maximum capacity of the park, other than the fact that they have to keep operational servers for all of their users, these guys have realized that if they give you the software for free and then just hold back part of it, that while a lot of people might just take it and use it for free, a few people will give you some money, and even fewer will give you a whole lot of money. And that sum total of all the people is more than if you charged everyone a fixed rate.
So the monetization model that you're talking about is commonly referred to as free-to-play. The free-to-play, typically, this is what free-to-play monetization model looks like, is you download a game, it is free. Sometimes they'll have ads and you can pay to get the ads removed, but that is a separate topic. Mobile, PC games, there's a lot that follow this monetization model where the game itself is free and you can do everything you want in the game for free. You can get to all of the content as far as you want to go, and you don't have to pay a dime. You don't have to. However, the manufacturer or the publisher incentivizes paying them for convenience. So, for example, Magic the Gathering Arena. Magic Arena, the newest client that they have on PC, is free to play. You can download, start an account, and play Magic to your heart's content for free. You don't have to pay a dime to this game. However, a lot of the content requires in-game currency. You can get the in-game currency by being patient, and you can accrue it slowly over time. Or you can just pay them a seemingly small amount of money for an absurd amount of the in-game currency. So while you can just be strictly free and you cannot put any money at all into the game, you can save yourself a ton of time and get to where your end state or where you want to be in the game for $20, $25 a month maybe. So, and that's the incentivizing. It is free, and they get to say you can play all the Magic you want for free. But it's kind of obnoxious and really frustrating unless you pay in a certain amount of money.
Yeah. And you've been trying to get me to get into Arena, and I started this week, and I found it to be exactly those two things you said, obnoxious and frustrating.
Now, Magic Arena is a good example of free-to-play done what I would consider right. Because
right meaning fairly, as in
yes, they're
your
not,
hands above the table.
They're
not trying to cheat you here.
Yes, we everything is out in the open. We're not trying to take advantage of you. We are clearly incentivizing you to pay money, but you don't have to. There are other games that do it completely wrong, where they have there's hard and soft paywalls. So the hard paywalls are like, this content is completely inaccessible to you unless you pay money, and that's just not fair. Like, if you a lot of competitive games fall into that category, where like, oh well, this equipment that you can buy for your character is quantifiably better, and if you want to be competitive in this game, you have to pay the money to get it. That is a hard paywall. A lot of publishers are moving away from those because they realize that people will identify them and then raise all the red flags like, oh, this game's ridiculous and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What's more insidious is the soft paywalls. There was a game that I downloaded. YouTube got me. Like, YouTube was showing me an ad for this game, Raid Shadow Legends, every 5 seconds. Every time I watched a video, I was getting that preview. And I was like, the production values look good. I'm going to try it just to see what YouTube is trying to shove down my throat. And I downloaded it and I played it for 1 weekend. And it's a very well polished game, and it looks good, and it's fun. It's got an interesting play model, and the primary gameplay loop is entertaining enough. But I played it for like a handful of hours, and I got to the point where I started to see the soft paywall kick in. I'm like, oh, there it is right here. This is how they're going to start sucking me for money. And I uninstalled it from my phone immediately. And the idea there was that you can progress in the game and continue to earn experience and level up and get the things that you need, but then they just start the required amount of time to continue to play for free goes up exponentially. Where at first you feel like you're making a ton of progress and you're having fun and you're doing really well, but then it starts taking a little bit longer to get to that next level, and then a little bit longer still, and then a little bit longer yet. And then there's all these different ways that, like, oh, well, for just like $1, I could tweak this little setting here and make this a little bit better. Oh, and then for like $2 here, I can get this character that's going to make things just slightly more optimal for this thing. And like, there is no bottom to that pool of money that you can pour in. Like, there's just this black hole of just dumping your life savings into it to optimize and get better. And it never does. Like, as soon as you pour in money, like, you're just going to accelerate to the next wall. And it's like, oh, well, now I'm at this paywall and I'm going to have to pay some more to get past this one.
So the pattern you just described is, older than dirt. That's the pattern of like heroin addiction. It's the same kind of thing. You do a little at first. You just do a little bit, and you get high, and then it takes more and more and more, and you're in the gutter.
It's funny you bring up addiction, because these manufacturers deliberately build the systems around Skinner box techniques. And if you've not heard who Skinner was he a psychoanalyst?
Human psychologist?
Yeah, exactly. He was funded by the War Department in World War II to train pigeons how to guide bombs into aircraft carriers, which is awesome, and you should watch that video on YouTube if you haven't yet.
Wow.
But those same techniques where you give randomized rewards to certain types of behavior that you want to reinforce, all of these games do exactly the same thing. They reinforce psychological behavior that they want the player to feel. And then when you're feeling all these good feelings and you want more of these good feelings, and like, oh, you can still have these good feelings, it's just going to be $1.
Yeah. So you described that pattern, and you also described how you went into it with your eyes open. Like, you knew what they were going to try to do. You were aware of it when you saw it start to happen. You were prepared for that, and you backed away from it. Those defenses are, from a well-educated, successful, intelligent person. I like to think of myself as that as well. But the pattern you described about passing the safe wall and then the soft paywall and then accelerating to the next and getting sucked in more and more and more. So that happened to me just starting back in February. So there was one game just the same pattern you described. I was on social media, I don't remember which platform, and I kept seeing an ad for one particular game. You've probably seen it. It shows a little guy inside of a box, and there's like 3 or 4 pull tabs on the outside of the box, and if you pull them out in the right order, it saves the guy.
That game? Really?
Okay, here's the thing. That ad has been so successful that it's been mimicked, and there's like 5 different iterations of it for completely different games.
Right, yeah, I've seen that.
But this is the one with the highest looking production values. Like the graphics look really good of this little guy in the box, and you pull out the things.
Okay.
So, and they always do it wrong, which is great psychology for me. I'm like, no, you're doing it wrong. But of course, you can't fix it unless you actually install the game and play it yourself.
You want to feel like I'm so much smarter than this dumb person in this ad.
Yeah. So right about the time that the quarantine started, and I got put on nights where I was working 7 consecutive 12-hour shifts and could literally do nothing else in my life to relax but pick up my phone for a few minutes and stare at it, and my brain was fried from these 13, 14-hour shifts I was working, I installed this game. And in the first 20 minutes, you play the only 3 guy in the box pull out the tabs puzzles in the whole game, and they're all gone. It is a complete bait and switch. Like, no lie, it's 100% bait and switch. That game has nothing to do with that puzzle. However, what they had instead, it's called Hero Wars, this particular one. What they had instead was exactly the kind of thing I knew I would be very attracted to, and I started playing it. And I immediately did the accelerate to where, through the early levels till my progress started slowing. And like you said, just pay a couple of dollars and you can move on. And I was like, I just got a couple hours before I got to go back on shift again. I just want to play this game. And I paid a few dollars here, a few dollars there, accelerated the paywall, got sucked in, and started paying a lot of money. Initially, it was just a little bit, and then it was a lot. Now, there was another thing that happened. About that time, a good longtime friend of mine that I've been friends with since 1990 said, hey man, I'm playing one of these online games, why don't you try it with me? And it was the same kind of game. It was, again, a microtransaction, free-to-play game. This one is called Empires and Puzzles, and it's built around an iteration of the game Bejeweled, where you have a field of colored bits, and you swap them around until they match, and then things happen. But then there's a fantasy role-playing game on top of that, and you interact with the fantasy role-playing game's combat system by matching the colored shields. So I just installed the one game, I was getting sucked into it, and then I installed the other game, and I was tired, and I was working a lot, and I completely lost track of how much money I was dumping into this thing. So just a week ago, you asked me, you're like, hey man, what have you been doing in Magic lately? And I was like, I gotta be honest, I haven't been playing Magic. And you're like, why not? And I said, I've been playing these online games. I told you what they were, and you go, oh no, tell me you haven't been dumping money into them.
Well, because I knew there's no mobile game that exists on the market right now that doesn't have these ridiculous microtransactions built into it.
So I said, I know, I have been dumping money into it, and it's probably quite a lot. But I haven't actually been keeping track because they're designed for you not to keep track.
That's the thing. Like, one of the key elements of all of these games is what they'll have you do is you don't buy the thing that you need with actual dollars. They never put a dollar sign on that. No. They convert it to some kind of fake currency. It's like, oh, well,
yes,
do this thing.
That doesn't really correlate.
Yes, this thing costs 320 gems. And then you go to a completely different screen and you can buy gems, and it's never in the multiples of what you're paying for. Right. For set amounts of money. And then they set up the pay structure, so it's like, oh, well, I get a huge discount if I spend $50 instead of $40, so I might as well just spend the 10 extra.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
So you got to buy gems, and then you convert the gems to coins, and then you use the coins to buy shields, and then use the shields to get the thing that you want. So there's like 5 levels of abstraction, and you did it with and here's the thing, I have it set up so that it will do with Apple Pay, which goes to my credit card, which uses my fingerprint, and it's so easy. It's so easy to just be like $50, boom, dump right into the game, just like that. And then I'm like the king for like 20 minutes. I'm like spending money and
man, for $50 for only 20 minutes, you can be king for longer than 20 minutes with $50 in Vegas, Ben. And there's no conversion to fake currency involved. This is $50.
Well, it's funny that you bring up actual gambling, because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints strictly forbids gambling. And when okay, so audience, I want you to know here that Josh is the best kind of friend that you can have, because when we had this discussion where it came out and I started to say, hey man, I have been spending money on it, and he's like, okay, it's probably a lot more than you think you have. I'm like, well, tell you what, I saved all the receipts, I'll go in and I'll total them up and figure out how much money I've spent. And I said, I got an idea. I can't remember whether this is your idea or mine. I'll tell you how much I think I spent, and then I'll count out how much I actually spent, and we'll figure out how close I am.
That was me. I asked you what you think you spent, and then you volunteered to actually add it up, because this is important, because it, like you said, with the layers of abstraction, it's very easy to lose track how much money you're actually spending on these things.
Okay, so I'm talking about a 3-month period of time here, and 2 games, one with about a month of lead time, and when I started the second one, I took a big break on the first one, and then right about the time I took my second 8-day stint of working 13-hour shifts on the Crisis Battle Staff, switching from days to nights, I started playing both of them pretty hard. And over that 3-month period, my estimate was that I'd spent $1,200.
Which is a lot.
Which is a lot. You know, if you divide it across 3 months, that's $400 a month. I actually spent $2,400.
Which is a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, that's $800 a month I spent on these 2, just games where I'm looking at my screen. Now, Josh, I have to tell you here that I could still just delete this out in post-production, but I'm very deliberately confessing here, and I'll put the chart up that I made on the show notes, because I think there's a dearth of this kind of discussion in society, at least in my life, in my experience, where we actually talk about the real problems that we're facing and what actually happened. And the actual fact is, I wasted $2,400 on a little stupid game on my phone where I just tap on the screen in 3 months' time.
Which, there is an argument on the other side saying that you personally derived some value from that. And the idea being that if your lifestyle can sustain that kind of spending, then there is nothing wrong with you spending money to feel better. That's what money is for. If you've covered all of the essentials and the necessities and you're providing, then the rest is literally just to make you feel better.
I'm not going to let you let me off that easy, because you said all the right kind of things. And there are 2 things you said next. One is you could pay for a child to go to college with that much money, and you were absolutely right. I have 6 kids, and I should be using that money better for things like that. The other thing that you said, and this is why I was bragging on you as a friend, is because you said, does your wife know about this? That's the kind of thing a good friend says.
Yeah, and like I asked you that question because I don't know what the dynamic is between you and Alicia, but I know the dynamic between myself and Nicole, that if I had spent $2,400 on a mobile game, regardless of the amount of value that I derived from it, we would have a much different discussion, her and I, than other people would. And I just wanted to make sure that, I wasn't going to try to call you and you wouldn't be available for a year or 2. And this would be the thing that caused you to be murdered and buried in the backyard.
All right. So, and appreciate you looking out for me like that. And as soon as you and I hung up the phone, after I'd made the chart and figured out how much it was, because like I'd said, I fell into the trap and had spent twice as much as I thought I had, which was still a lot. The amount that I thought I'd spend was still too much to have spent. So I got off with you, and I thought, Josh is right. I need to call Alicia. So she was out of town. She'd taken the kids, her and all 6 of our kids had gone up to her mother's house. So I was here by myself, and I picked up the phone, and I called her, and I'm like, honey, I need to talk to you about something. She's like, yeah. I'm like, I spent a lot of money on an online game. She's like, how much? I said, $2,400. So we got the bad news out of the way, and then we had the talk. And over the course, I don't like to drag that out. I'm a very much a bad news up front kind of person. I'm not going to make chit chat.
I would say let's rip off this Band-Aid, but that's more like let's rip off this arm.
So after I got that out of the way, I kind of explained to her, what I'd been going through and what the, like you were saying, the value I feel like I got out of it. And she said to me, that sounds like the same way people justify a gambling addiction.
Ooh, oh, wow, man, just pull the knife right out of my heart here. Oh, you got me. That's it. That's it. There is no coming back from that.
Yeah, but you know what? She's right. I wasn't, I'm not going to get any, it doesn't have the allure that gambling has of potentially getting your money back or getting even richer than what you started with, which is a lie too. But, I was following the same kind of pattern where I was just sending, you described it well with the, accelerating into the next soft paywall.
I mean, and this is the thing, you are not alone. you are not the only person in the world that has fallen victim to this kind of monetization scheme in these games. This is not like, I mean, you're a good person, Ben. You try to do better, and the fact that you identified this in yourself, you're going to try to improve, that speaks volumes about your force of will. But there is no doubt at all that these are very predatory schemes that these publishers are using. Like, this is literally a machine and a software. Like you said, back in the day, you paid $60 and got your game, and if it was good, you told your friends. The incentive there was for the publisher to make a good game that would sell well. Now, the incentive is for publishers to create the most efficient machine to extract money from you, the player. And it's predatory, and it's wrong, and it's borderline abusive. There are, in fact, so there's another monetization scheme that I think every game on the planet adopted at one point or another, and it's called loot boxes. And any game where you can have equipment or items or gear or buffs or whatever that you can purchase and make you, the player, better for some short amount of time, you could spend real money on a randomized product. And it's like, oh, it's a box. And you open the box and it's a surprise what you get, which is another Skinner box technique, by the way. Like, you feel better about getting something that you want as a surprise rather than just paying directly for it. And so what these publishers would do is they would stack these boxes full of mostly worthless garbage, and they would have tiny random percent values of getting something really amazing out of it. And they would just sell them for completely random. And these are digital goods. They cost the publisher nothing to make, and they would charge some insignificant amount of money for each one. And then you would buy, chunks of them and hopefully get the thing that you wanted. If you didn't, there's no way to get the thing that you actually want directly, so you just have to keep pouring money into this slot machine, essentially, until you get the things that you want. That specific loot box model, like, people might recognize those words because that was in the news cycle a year or two ago, because there was a couple of countries in Europe that outlawed, that they said flat out, this is a form of gambling, and you are selling this, you're marketing it and directing it at children that are, 10 or 12 years old. This is ridiculous. And there were articles about, kids spending thousands of dollars on their parents' credit card to try to get some random, jersey for their soccer player in a FIFA game or something.
So after you said this to me, I went and watched a few videos about it. And while we say that they're trying to protect children, that's usually what lawmakers do when they're trying to get people to pay attention to them. But kids don't have credit cards, and they might rack up a big bill one month, but then their parents are going to shut them off and they're not going to be it. I saw some videos that suggested the real victims of this are lonely adults. I don't know if I qualify as that, but one of the psychological aspects one of these games really harnessed that was very effective on me was it funnels you into being part of a team and then makes you feel like the team can't succeed unless you pull your weight. And I got to tell you, man, that really pulls my psychological, pushes my psychological buttons, is the feeling that I'm not pulling my weight as a member of a part of a team unless I, pay this paywall.
Yeah, and that's, again, that is a strictly psychological predatory tactic to extract money from you. It's ridiculous and it's not right.
But it wasn't even the company doing it. That's the thing. They set up the system that makes it so that you all have this objective you're trying to accomplish and everybody has to do a piece of the objective. But then it wasn't that they were saying, hey man, you need to pull your weight. It's when I started pulling my weight more, they all went, hey, great job, thanks.
But yeah.
And it wasn't some mysterious game publisher doing it. It was my friends. Some of them I know in person.
No.
Some of them I only know from online.
No. Publishers do not get off the hook for this because they built that system intentionally.
Oh, no. I'm not saying my friend, yes, they built that system intentionally. My friends don't know they're doing that. They don't realize that the reason I'm doing better is because I'm paying so much money into it. I think maybe they do. I don't know. It feels like they should be like, hey man, you're kind of making levels really fast here. Is everything okay?
And that plays on the social norm of like stay out of other people's chili, right? Like right. You said, these people, you might not know them from Adam. They're just some online dude. And if he's got all the best stuff and he's racking up levels like nobody's business, well, obviously he's got money to pour into this game. You assume that everybody playing is a responsible adult with full control over their finances and impulses. Why should these people be any different?
I saw one story when I was Googling this of a woman who was part of her online guild, and she had run so far out of money trying to pay into this game that she couldn't afford the care that she needed, and she ended up in the hospital.
Oh, jeez. You see, but that's the thing. That is not an isolated incident. This is happening to a lot of people in a lot of places.
So I don't have a good conclusion with this other than that I appreciate you as a friend asking the additional questions about this, caring about my wife and family, and helping me pull out of it. Because I just need a little kick. I'm good now. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like,
said the meth addict.
I'm out. I
get it. It's good. I'm glad that you identified this. What I think the takeaway from this discussion is hopefully people listening to us that, because there's a lot of parents that just are completely zoned out of this entire world. There are still people out there that aren't aware of how video games function, or they don't know the latest monetization schemes that video game publishers are creating or whatever. But this should be a call for these people. Like, don't go out and become an expert, but watch a couple of videos. Be aware of what your kids are doing and what you're doing, what your spouse is doing. Just like
we'll put a couple of links to a few good ones in because there are some watchdogs out there that have made this their cause to be an advocate for.
Yeah. And one thing I want to point out is that this kind of behavior is not limited to video game publishing. Like, they're the worst offenders right now because they're an entertainment industry and they get away with a lot of things. But we're seeing more and more medias and everything moving to this model where, I don't want you to pay once. I want you to pay for the rest of your life. Software as a service now, where before you could buy Microsoft Office and you just had it forever. And you just had like, I'm cranking out my paper on Word 2003 because that's the last time I bought it. Now you've got to pay a subscription to get access to that software. TV. Before, you just bought a TV and plugged it into your wall and you got access to all this free stuff. Now, like either cable, satellite, or one of the streaming services, you are paying. And this is what really grinds my gears, Ben. Hulu, I'm paying you already. Why do you insist on still showing me ads? Like, you got rid of you didn't get rid of all the ads. You got rid of the middle of the show ads. We're still going to show you ads at the beginning of the show. It's like, that's ridiculous, Hulu. You shouldn't have this kind of tiered service. Because yes, I'm absolutely going to pay to get all of the ads gone. But why do you even have that as an option? Anyway,
why do we even have that lever?
I could see this getting worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Did you ever see that Black Mirror episode, 5 million credits or something? I think that's the title of the episode.
I only watched the first Black Mirror episode where everyone went around giving each other ratings.
Okay, no, this one, this guy, it shows this guy living in a tiny little apartment, and every surface in his apartment is a screen, and he has it tuned to some idyllic Norwegian landscape, and it's just like some fjord, and it's beautiful, and he's just relaxing. And then all of a sudden, a very intense, like, adult pornography ad comes on.
That's probably why I didn't watch that one.
Yeah, well, it's just, it doesn't show anything, but it's clearly an ad for hardcore porn, and it's like loud and blaring and grating, and it comes on every screen in his room. And he like closes his eyes and covers his face, and it pauses, and there's a big banner that says like client not watching or something. And then he opens his eyes back up and he like does a hand gesture, and it comes up with like, skip this ad for however much money, and he clicks yes. And then it sees his credits on the screen tick down, and he goes back to his idyllic fjord. And the whole society is built.
That's horrific.
Yeah, it's like, if you've never seen Black Mirror, watch a couple episodes. It's great, like dystopian, nightmarish type scenarios. But the whole show, that whole episode was about this concept of microtransactions in a person's life. Like, he went to the bathroom and he put his toothbrush under a little dispenser and he made a hand gesture. And as the toothpaste was dispensing onto his toothbrush, his credits were ticking down.
Huh. And it's easy for us to imagine these slippery slope type end games for all the things that are happening right now. I'll go on a website and buy a pair of shoes, and then for the next 2 weeks, every social media platform and website I go on is trying to get me to buy shoes. Like, hello? Maybe the invasion of our privacy will just be so complete that we don't get these, like, partial execution problems. Like, I already bought the shoes, thank you.
Oh, this is so if we're going to stray into how algorithms know you better than you, I've heard a couple of stories where there was an algorithm that sent like coupons and things to a household, to a person specifically, that was all baby stuff. It was like, coupons for diapers and coupons for formula.
I see where this is going.
And the dad called the manager, the regional manager or something.
Hey, there's no babies here.
Totally irate because all of these direct mailers were sent to his teenage daughter. And so he was flipping out, how ridiculously audacious are you coming out and saying that she's pregnant or blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker, Ben. That same guy apparently called back or wrote in like a couple weeks later apologizing because the algorithm had correctly identified her shopping habits as a pregnant woman, and she was pregnant, and the father just didn't know at the time.
Wow. Just because of the kind of things she was looking for.
Yes, the kind of things you're looking at online, the kinds of, just terrifying. So yes, people, if you don't know this already, your phones are listening to you. Your PCs are listening to you. Everything that you click on the internet is tracked. And if you don't believe me, go to something that you would never in a million years ever think of purchasing. Go to the Home Depot website and spend 3 minutes clicking on different, sinks or faucets. And then pay attention to all of the banner ads that you get for the next week. They're all going to be sinks and faucets, I promise you.
Weird Al Yankovic made this joke a few years ago. I don't remember which of his parodies it was, but he's like, I only watched Will and Grace one time, one day, and now my TiVo thinks I'm gay.
Yeah. Hulu, you're bad at guessing. Just stop trying.
All right. Well, I think I've had it with that. Although I want to take a slight deviation before we wrap things up, and that is, it might not. Maybe if you're a stranger and you don't know me, you don't, all you know about me, from listening to this podcast, you don't know how vulnerable it might have felt for me to talk about wasting a lot of money on an online game where I feel like I was just making a bad decision, out of control, and just lost money. The same as if I'd gambled it away. But that feels really vulnerable for me. And for me to make the decision to talk about this with Josh, who I trust, but on a podcast where other people are listening, it's kind of a big decision for me. And I made that decision deliberetely because I don't think we do this enough in society. And I'll talk specifically about my own personal situation where I go, I worship in a church where we go and we try to live a life where we're trying to improve ourselves. And we talk about ways to improve ourselves. We talk about how to give freely to others and how to be more forgiving and repent when we make mistakes and those kinds of things. But there's this weird sterility that exists around all of that self-improvement where it doesn't feel like you're actually talking about reality. You're talking about this hypothetical where something someone else did. You don't ever talk specifics. In fact, if anyone starts to delve into specifics, you get kind of uncomfortable. And because of that, there's this barrier that exists between you and the other people that you worship with. The people that you have so much in common with that maybe should be your closest friends aren't, because there's this self-defense. So
the metaphor that you're using as a barrier between people is very apt, because you're describing it as if it's this weird nuanced thing that you're discovering, which, I mean, maybe, but this exists. There is this barrier between your true self and the rest of the world. And on the outside of this barrier, you paint this picture of what you want the world to perceive. You have called me out several times in this podcast. I want the world to perceive me as this uncaring jerk, because then that limits and reduces and changes how the world interacts with me. And on the inside of this barrier is my true self that I protect very closely, because that true self is very vulnerable, Ben. Putting yourself out there and telling us about these experiences that you had and this vulnerability, it is hard and it is difficult, because you have to take down this barrier, and you have to take down the walls and show people what you are on the inside. And it makes you uncomfortable, and it makes other people uncomfortable because of the vulnerability that you're displaying. In our entire society, every person, they don't want to be vulnerable. They want to be this rock, this mountain, no, unshakable. You know what I mean?
So, my mom listens to this show. My kids listen to this show. My wife listens to this show. Some of my siblings listen to this show. Some of my friends, people like that. And they're not the kind of people, you know, if we were just interacting casually on the street, I'd be like, hey, I wasted $2,400 on Farmville, you know, on Candy Crush, on Clash of Clans.
At the same time, it's almost easier to tell random people. Like, it would be easier to be standing in line at a Circle K and look to the guy next to you like, I spent $2,400 yesterday on Candy Crush. And he doesn't care. But it would be almost impossible to tell your son that. Like, look him in the eye. It's like, hey, buddy, we can't get this Frosty because I spent $24 on Candy Crush today.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. You know, my son's getting ready to go off to college, and I'm talking to him about being responsible with money and, you know, budgeting and saving up to buy a laptop and stuff like that. I could have bought a laptop with that money I spent on that game.
You could have bought a good laptop with the money you spent on that
game. You're not helping. Yeah. So that was what I wanted to say. And, you know, not that I think everyone should just go around with their heart on their sleeve. There's a reason we set up those protections. But I also think that there is some value to allowing yourself to be a bit vulnerable so that you can connect or talk about things as they really are instead of talking about hypotheticals like we're always talking about someone else that doesn't really exist.
Yeah. I get that. We should be more open to the people that are important to us in our lives. Like, let down the barrier, let them see your true self. And yeah, you're exposing yourself and you might get hurt, but that's going to deepen the connection and the relationship between you and that person. And that can only bring good things.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mom, I hope you can forgive me for wasting money on video games.
All right. That was super heavy. So I have two things that we need to do to lighten this up. Okay. First of all.
right.
I have to know. Did you kill all of the bees in your house? They cannot still be there.
Okay, so when we talked about this on episode 21, I talked about it like I was setting up camp, right? Like I was ready for this colony of bees that moved into my house to just live there.
You called them your roommates, man. Like you were just like in the like I guess bees just live here now. I'm in it for the long haul.
Well, okay, so after that. I went out there and I was staring up at the hive. I had some sunglasses on, and one of them flew right at my face and stung me right in the eye, like right on the cheek.
Because they're stinging insects. I told you this.
And I was like, man, that really hurt. And I thought, you know, it doesn't do me any good to yell at these bees, and they don't know that I hold all of their lives in the palm of my hand. Like I could just fill their colony with poison. But I'm going to let that sting go.
How dare you be? I am your god. I can smite your entire people out of existence.
And I like to imagine that bee as like some guy that's had a bad day and he goes outside and yells profanities and shakes his middle finger at the sky. You know, God's not going to just destroy the whole colony because someone stung him.
Listeners, this is the difference between me and Ben. Because Ben's like, you know what, bee? I'm going to turn the other cheek. Whereas if I had been stung in the cheek by bees living in my house, my wife would have come into the backyard to see me in a full, like, completely ad hoc beekeeper outfit and a sledgehammer. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's me or the bees, and it's not going to be me.
Well, okay, after I got stung in the face, which hurt for a long time, I hadn't been stung by a bee in years, and it reminded me that, yeah, that really sucks. So I texted the landlord. I'm like, hey, you know, one of the bees stung me. I wasn't even doing anything. I'm not going to be mowing on that side of the house until you get this taken care of. He didn't reply, but a couple of days later, he shows up with a guy who's a beekeeper. Like full beekeeping outfits, ladders, equipment, saws, everything.
Nobody thinks about beekeepers until you need beekeepers, and then they just come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, well, apparently a colony of bees you can sell easily for $200. So if they can come to my house and carry this whole thing away in 2 hours, that's $100 an hour. You know, that's like not, you know, it's worth their time to come and do it.
Yeah,
I don't got to pay them. So the landlord shows up to do the like cutting the house open stuff because he had to rip the siding off basically to get to where they'd gone. And basically they were, I hadn't thought about this, but when I said last week that they were in my wall, that wasn't correct. That's not a good way to think of it. Bees only hang their hives from a horizontal surface underneath.
Okay, hanging. It always hangs.
Right, it always hangs. And they need kind of a wide space. So imagine a bee box. You know, when you see a bee box, inside of there's rails, and they'll hang, you know, the thing that's about an inch wide directly down from the rail from the top. They don't build up from the bottom or build from the side. They start from the top and work their way down. So they're out there and they start cutting into the house and stuff, not knowing exactly what they're going to find. And I'm very curious, but I don't have a beekeeping outfit on, so I'm kind of maintaining a good safe distance, and they're doing the smoke thing, and as far as I can tell, I was imagining like it was in the cartoons. Do you remember growing up in the cartoons? The bear goes and he like taps on the outside of the hive, the entire colony comes out of the hive in a big cloud and turns into an arrow that points at the bear. You know what I mean?
As an adult, I realize it's a little more nuanced than that, but yeah, that's what I imagine happening. That's how it works. Yes,
that is not how it happens at all. The bees don't, until they actually sting someone and start putting off the pheromones and stuff like that, the colony doesn't erupt into frenzy. Everybody's still going about their business, even though you're like cutting into the house.
Okay.
So I come out and I kind of check on them. They're cutting off siding and haven't found anything yet. And I go back in the house and I come out later, and then they basically found that between the first and second floors, they cut off the end of the floor joist, pulled out the insulation, and there is a full 6-volume hive that's been put there in like 10 days. Like full beehive, probably like 2,000 bees right in the house. So it wasn't in the wall of my bedroom, it was in the floor between the first and second level.
That's so much worse. That's so much worse.
But it was still about 3 feet away from my head. So I cannot contain my excitement and curiosity at this point, and my landlord's like, hey, do you want to take my beekeeper's outfit and I'll just do other stuff now that I've cut into the house? My job's kind of done here.
Of course.
So I was like, would I? Boy howdy. So I threw on this beekeeper's outfit and the gloves and the hood and stuff, and I climbed up the ladder and I helped him pull all the bees out and put them in a box, and it was stinking awesome, Josh. I captured the whole thing on video. I'm going to put it up on our YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the show notes. It was fantastic. It was the coolest thing I've done this year so far.
You sound like one of those super tiny like dogs that just get so excited about the most nonchalant things. Like you're so stoked about these bees.
Well, you like to joke about all the experiences I've had in my life. There was a moment there where I could just be like, no thanks, I'm good, and gone back in the house and never had an experience being a beekeeper. But instead, I said yes, put on the bee costume, went up the ladder, and got to, handle a colony of bees. It was fantastic. I wouldn't say I'm an aspiring beekeeper now, but it was a really cool experience.
There's the type of person, when you go to a watering hole, and like, hey, do you want to go swimming? There's the kind of person that goes, no, thanks, I'm good. There's the kind of person that goes up and dabbles their foot in the shallow end. It's like, oh, this was a fun experience. And then there's the guy that comes screaming in naked and does the full cannonball in the deepest part that he can. And that's Ben Rich in a beekeeper's outfit. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing with bees, but there's 2,000 live angry bees in my floor, and boy, howdy, am I going to haul them out of here.
Oh man, it was so awesome. All right, so you wanted to, so I'll put the video up on our YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want it, if you're interested in seeing me extract a colony of bees from my house. You said you had 2 things you wanted to talk about before we.
Well, the other was just a very innocuous, honest question of, did you get any interesting packages in the mail lately?
Yes. Since you asked, I have one here. So I was aware that over Christmas time that you, for your annual make a craft project to give everyone as gifts, you were doing these handcrafted wooden coasters. I'm assuming this is my set. So I just had my birthday this last week, and you. One of the little rubber nubs fell off. I'm gonna pull these out and react to them here. I haven't seen them yet. Oh, they got bottle openers on the bottom. Okay, so I'll describe it, and I'll put a photo in the show notes. So these are some really nice coasters made out of a series of dark and light wood in a variegated stripe pattern. I don't know. What do you call this?
I don't know. Like a gradient almost?
Yeah, gradient. It's more dark on one side and more light on the other side, but it doesn't switch evenly. It's really nice. And I have a little cardboard coaster that I have my drink on here, and I will switch it to one of these.
Yes, and I realize that these coasters, each one does have a bottle opener built into the bottom, which you personally might not get a lot of value or utility out of. But I find in my beer drinking grown adult man's life that I cannot have enough bottle openers in my house. I never want to be more than a handful of feet from a bottle opener.
Well, now you have one on the bottom of every coaster. Well, Josh, these are fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A couple of the little rubber feet on the bottom of these fell off, and I got to find the other ones.
I'm missing. Those are like $2 adhesives from Home Depot. So they're not really essential. Like I don't know how much we want to talk about this on the podcast, but you can just set the wood straight onto other wood. Like the rubber feet are not essential.
Okay. Well, this is the second handcrafted Josh wooden creation that I have, and I love it as much as the other one, and I will cherish them. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome. Happy birthday. I made them 6 months ago, and they've just been sitting in my garage.
Waiting for my birthday.
Or until I remember to take them to the post office. One of those.
So we're due for a follow-up on the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge. I weighed in today, and I am still... my percent has not changed. I'm not getting the same numbers. Like, my neck measurement is changing, and my waist measurement is changing slightly from time to time. And your calculation, I don't know if it's an error in the database, but it just says 0% across the board for the last 2 full months.
Yeah, I'm looking at the inputs now, and I'm kind of suffering from the same thing. Like, I was doing good for a while, then I gained a little bit back, and then now I've been consistently the same across the board. And I can't tell you, like, the formula for this specific way of calculating body fat is bananas. Like, none of it makes any sense. But like I said at the beginning of this thing, it was developed by the Army, so I'm sure they poured way more money into it than we can possibly imagine. Now, I will say that I don't think your neck is supposed to change size all that much.
I don't know what to say. Time of day or whatever.
That might be a glandular thing.
I'm not talking. I'm talking about like a half-inch difference from time to time.
I gotcha. Okay. Well,
but I don't know how accurate I'm being in these measurements.
Well, and the idea here is, like we said at the beginning, whether it's accurate or not is kind of wishy-washy. But as long as you're measuring, entering the data consistently, we're using the same formula across the board.
You'll see a trend over time if there's a change.
Exactly. And since it's somehow taking in the measurement of our waist and our neck, at smaller numbers is going to equate to lower values percentage-wise. So if we're getting physically smaller, then we will see an improvement on the chart.
Okay. Well, thanks to our listeners for sticking with us. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a longtime listener, thanks for sticking around. If you'd like to join us in our discussion next week on the new psychology of success, watch YouTube video or maybe even read Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/badatmagic and become a supporter on there. You can join in the discussion on Facebook or Reddit. We'll set up a discussion for this, and you can find us always on badatmagic.live or on our YouTube channel /badatmagic.
We love all of our listeners. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. If you value what we're doing here, if you think it's a halfway decent discussion or somewhat entertaining, please tell your friends. If you're really motivated and really want to show your support, give us a good rating on your podcast player of your choice. We appreciate all of the feedback we can get.